This is going to be a spoiler-free review for the first season of Netflix The Witcher. I will be going heavy into spoilers and separate videos and reviewing each episode, but I know a lot of people probably haven't been able to binge watch all 8 episodes, so I just want to review this season just in case you are curious, but you don't want spoilers. So, season 1 of The Witcher was dumped on Netflix, and I say dumped because I absolutely hate binge watching things. I dislike it to such a crazy degree. I do not like sitting staring at a television for hours on end. Thankfully, this first season was so majestic that it made watching it really easy. I mean, I still got a little antsy towards the last 2 episodes, which I think the penultimate episode is perhaps the worst of all the episodes, but even saying that, it was fantastic. Very rarely do I give something a 9 out of 10 T-Rexes. If you ask why T-Rexes, well, this channel is called Rawrist. You know, Rar means I love you, and Dinosaurist, I talk about things I love. I love T-Rexes, and for some reason, it triggers people when I say out of T-Rexes and not stars, and it kind of just makes me giggle, so that's why. But yeah, 9 out of 10. That's how absolutely fucking majestic this first season was. Now, if you're not familiar with the Witcher series, or if you are, maybe you're a fan of the video games or books. If you are of the books or video games, I strongly recommend watching this first season. I think you will love it, even though they do make changes. Certainly, they take most of book lore for this first season, but I think video game lovers will notice that they took some stuff from the games and put it in there as well. I just think that this is a very nice adaptation of the books with a little bit sprinkled in from the video games that both sides will be very happy. Of course, I can't speak for you if you're a huge fan of the Witcher books. Maybe you absolutely hated this first season, but I think the majority of people that love the books will love this first season, even though they did take core stories and tweak them to work better, which I'll get into in a little bit. Anyways, if you're not into the Witcher world, the books, or the video games, will you like this first season? I think if you like fantasy at all, you will enjoy this show. I know it's been a nauseating thing to compare Game of Thrones to the Witcher Netflix TV series to the point where I just want to start sucker punching people that do it. 1, the Witcher stories were created before George even penned the first book, A Game of Thrones. 2, just because something is a medieval fantasy setting does not mean it copies off another show. And I still don't know how you can say The Witcher is copying off George and is A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones when the Witcher story was created first. If we really want to get into this argument, everyone copies off Tolkien. It's pretty evident. Stop it. Stop saying this is a Game of Thrones ripoff. You're an idiot. But hey, let's be an idiot for a minute, and let's say you love a Game of Thrones, and you're wondering, will I like the Witcher series? This is probably going to be the only time I'm going to compare Game of Thrones and the Witcher series, so here it goes. If you liked Game of Thrones, the TV series, you will most likely like The Witcher. Now, there are some differences. Yes, they both take place in a medieval-ish fantasy series. Both use magic, although you will notice magic is more OP in the Witcher world than in the World of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones. That's just because George R.R. Martin doesn't like magic being overpowering and OP, so that's a big change. Yes, there are dragons and boobies in Game of Thrones and in the Witcher series. I know boobies are a big deal for a lot of people. I don't know why. I'll never understand why. I like women. I like men. I just don't understand why boobies are the thing people lose their minds over. Maybe one day I will understand, but I'm an elderly person and I still don't know. So there we go. Yes, there are dragons, there are boobies in the Witcher Netflix TV series. The dragons are smarter in The Witcher. They can actually speak. They are not as intimidating, I would say, in the Witcher series as the dragons are in A Song of Ice and Fire. I think in brute force Game of Thrones dragons would win. In intelligence, hands down, Witcher dragons would just dominate. There's lots of nudity, there's lots of boobies. I understand some people get really upset about that. Something I really have been enjoying is, for some reason, our educational system has failed in this regard of letting people know penis and a vagina are primary sex characteristics, where breasts, Adam's apple, facial hair, chest hair are secondary sex characteristics. And it makes sense to cover primary sex characteristics, the penis and vagina, because that's a health concern. That's where you're going to spread most diseases and bacteria and stuff. So having people cover your primary sex characteristics makes sense from a health perspective. Secondary sex characteristics, not sure why nipples are so terrifying on women to people. So I really enjoy that they treat secondary sex characteristics in this show much like in Game of Thrones, where it just doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter. So I'm enjoying that, and I think the more we have shows like that, and the more we have topless women and men, and we treat it as it's the same, it'll help educate people, and then hopefully soon we can have a discussion about the data and studies that show the communities where women are free to go topless and it isn't a taboo, there's less rape and sexual harassment. But I don't think we're there yet in America. We'll get there. Sorry, Europe, we're just a little bit behind you guys. I am desensitized to sex, so if sex is something that bothers you, there is quite a bit. There is an orgy in this show. There are lots of boobies. I understand that there are people that are very uncomfortable with that, and if you are uncomfortable with that, this is not the show for you at all. And if you're curious, there's a lot of sex and boobies in the books, and they actually changed some things from the books, which I'll talk about in the spoiler review, that were actually less crude towards breast, and I found that interesting. Okay, so I want to move on from the Game of Thrones comparisons because, again, it's just nauseating how many news sites are writing articles comparing it to it, and I just want it to stop. Free me from this pain. So moving on, I really think what I liked most about this is they really captured the fantasy horror element of the books. I don't like straight horror, so I don't like slasher films. I don't like Scream. I know what you did last summer. Unless there is a sci-fi fantasy element to it, I do not like horror. So this is a beautiful blend. They did a beautiful job blending fantasy with horror. And the books do a great job of this. The show does a great job of this. They tweaked the monsters in some regards a little bit, but I loved it. I love anything horror related in fiction genre. So this was pretty well done, very scary. Certain creatures didn't look how I thought they would look, which I'll get into in my spoiler review, but I really don't have any complaints about the monsters in this show. So hey, if you like fantasy horror, you'll probably like this show as well. Going on, Henry Cavill as Geralt, I think he did a beautiful job. I was never worried about him playing Geralt. I really like him as an actor. I know a lot of people don't. I honestly think he is one of the better actors and more believable actors. He says a lot with his face and eyes, and just his mannerism of his body, how he carries himself, and he's not so much someone that excels through spoken words. So I like that, and I think for Geralt that is perfect. I like the voice that Henry has for him. I like the mannerisms. I like his dry, dark humor, how he gets it across. I feel like he does a really great job portraying Geralt, and I really like his take on the character. I'd be interested for people that are fans of the books and video games, your thoughts on him as Geralt and whether you liked it or not, because I was stunned by his performance, but I'm usually by that actor just because of how well he expresses himself with non-verbal indicators, I guess, gestures. I don't know if I was as impressed with Yennefer and Ciri's actresses. I think Anya did a good job with playing Yennefer. The thing with Yennefer is, in one moment you love her, and the next moment you just want to choke her out. And I think she did a great job getting that across, that Yennefer's just this character you love, but you also hate. And in the books, I kid you not, you will love her, and then a few pages later, you're just like, we need to get rid of this bitch. So I think that was very well done. Ciri, I don't know, maybe I just don't like children on the screen, so I'm having a harder time warming up to her character, but I'm sure I'll get there. I love her way more in the books, but I don't know. We'll see where it goes now that she is with Geralt. Going back to the books, I think they did a great job of taking the short stories. So there are 2 prequel books before the main Witcher saga, which starts with The Blood of Elves. It is The Last Wish and The Sword of Destiny. And those are shorter stories. The Last Wish has a bunch of flashback short stories while he heals at a temple from the Striga, which you will also see in this season. And then The Sword of Destiny, I'm going to be covering in a bit. We're almost there for people that support me on Patreon. I'm really excited. We're finishing up the Last Wish chapter breakdowns. But I like how they took these short stories and made them unique to the show. So the core stories are definitely there, but they tweaked it to make sense and for it to be better on the show. Because I know a lot of people understand that what works in books in that medium does not work on screen, and so you have to change things around for them to be better. You're not in characters' heads, so you don't get to see the subtle things as much on television. So I think for the most part they did a great job taking those stories and making them work for the Netflix adaptation. There are a few places where I think they made some mistakes and it was a worse change, but I will talk about that in my spoiler review. But I would be interested, if you are familiar with all of the short stories, for you to see how they adapted them and which ones you think they did a great job and which ones you think, not so much. A big thing I like that they did in this first season is doing the backstory of Ciri and Yennefer. I think that is great to have instead of, we get little blurbs in the books of things that happened, but in this first season, I love that we went back in time to see more of these backstories alongside what Geralt is doing. I think that is one thing that they definitely improved on by doing in this show, and I really look forward to seeing more. So if you're a book reader, if you love the video games, I say give it a try. If you like a fantasy series, give it a try. I will say one more thing about Game of Thrones that I find a little funny and I'm waiting for. So those of us that started almost 20 years ago reading the Song of Ice and Fire series at conventions and getting together, you would pronounce the name a certain way, and it was like a little fun thing to meet other fans who said the character names in a different way, and George always said it didn't matter to him. And then the showrunners also said for Game of Thrones, yeah, we don't really care. Why are you fighting about this? So in watching the first season, they said things a little different than how a majority of fans I met said it. So this is going to be another thing that happened with Game of Thrones, where the book readers are going to be screamed at by the show-only watchers saying, "You're saying it wrong! Why do you say it like that?" And it's going to be so funny. It's like I'm having PTSD flashbacks to when that happened with Game of Thrones, and the show watchers are like, "No, this is how you're now going to say it. I don't care that you've been part of this for 10 years longer than me." I love it. It's hilarious. I'll go more into that in a separate video too, because I was watching that going, ooh, they're gonna piss some people off. So yeah, like, subscribe, come back for more videos. Again, if you support me on Patreon, one, thank you very much. But please go back and watch the videos I have posted for you on Vimeo, whatever, that site. You know, I link it in the post on Patreon. Check out those chapter breakdowns, because I really think you listening to my breakdowns, watching my breakdowns, and then watching the show is going to make it more enjoyable. I'm probably biased, but I don't know.